Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Haston will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative Haston, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 820 days ago was my first day on the House floor. On that first day here, my granddad, Hoyt Kirk, served as chaplain of the day. He had a health scare last week and was in the hospital for 3 days. And I just want to thank the fine folks, his nurses and doctors at Vanderbilt Medical Center that took really good care of him and got him home this past weekend. And I just want to thank him, if he's watching at home, for being my coach, my preacher, and my best friend for the last 40 years. Would you pray with me? Our Father which art in heaven, we thank you for this day and the many blessings of it. We have much to be thankful for, Father. We thank you for this opportunity we have to serve the people of this great state. We thank you for our families at home. We thank you for our church families. We thank you for our family that's here in this very chamber. We pray that you be with each one of us and help us to have the courage and wisdom to make the right decisions and to lead in the right way. Most of all, we're thankful for your Son and the sacrifice that he made for each one of us, that we might have a home of heaven someday. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
Representative Haston will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 89 members present.
Let the journal reflect that Representatives Byrd, Carter, Ogles, and Farmer are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome my intern, Ms. Shelby Batson, currently from University of Tennessee Martin, this semester transferring to UT Knoxville next semester for law school. Please make her welcome.
Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's days like today that renews my hope and enthusiasm in our great state. We have a young man in our midst that will be going to OCS, Officer Candidate School in Quantico, Virginia. He's joining an organization that's been in existence for 246 years and is still in business, and that would be the United States Marine Corps. Could we please welcome Spencer Shaw?
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to give special honor to Jennifer Thompson, who has somehow put up with this representative for 42 years as of yesterday. Thank you.
Representative Whitson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome to the gallery today, and the young man is going to be shadowing me as Edward Birch. He's the Director of Business Development for ECD. Welcome, Edward. Good to have you here today.
Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the gallery to my left, I wanted to welcome Jeff and Benja White. This is their first time at watching session with us. They're actually constituents of Representative Sapicki, but they are the parents of my assistant, Miss Anna Catherine White. So if you'll welcome them, with us this morning. Thank you.
Representative Eldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a couple of friends up in the gallery here to our right that are from up in East Tennessee, Greg Von Cannon and Jesse Seals. Please make them welcome.
Representative Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, we lost a true hero. He was my constituent, I'm very proud to say. He was a Medal of Honor winner, World War II, Charles Coolidge. He would have been 100 years old in August, but he led an amazing life. I would welcome and ask all of you to visit Chattanooga and come to the Medal of Honor Museum, where you can see the full story of the amazing feats that he did, along with all the other Medal of Honor winners in this country. But he led a long and fruitful life. He contributed to his community. He has a son who's a general who followed him into the military, another son who is my constituent there on Signal Mountain, and a host of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But if you would, just a moment of silence recognizing Sergeant Charles Coolidge and his passing. Thank you.
Representative Gillespie.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want everyone to draw their attention in the back. My predecessor and everyone's friend, Representative Jim Coley, is here today. And if everyone could just make sure to wish him and say hello to him, and if we get a round of applause for him.
Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to request a moment of silence this morning for the Gunnels family. On Wednesday, March the 24th, 2001, Thomas Corey Gunnels passed away after a long battle with cancer. Corey leaves behind a wife, Ashton, a son, Cabe, brother Brett, mother Vicky, and father Doug Gunnels, who we all are familiar with from working with T-Dot. So if you would, let's take a moment and pray for peace and comfort for this family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Lear Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are many extraordinary individuals that we work with on a daily basis down here, but one such extraordinary individual, Mr. Lang Wiseman, has a birthday today. So if you see him, please wish him a happy birthday.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I've got a heavy heart today, and with your indulgence, I'm going to tell you about a good friend who actually served in this chamber, Judge Kenneth Porter. He served in the 80th, 81st, 82nd General Assembly in the House. Then he came back in the 88th General Assembly and served in the Senate. But I brought him on the House floor 6, 7 years ago, and on the way in, he told me a story that y'all are going to love. He was the very first Republican in the General Assembly to actually have a phone. Up until he came, no Republican had ever been allowed to have a phone. He was also the first Republican to have an office. Up until that point, the Democrats had a strong control, and they had no Republican had ever been allowed to have an office or a phone. He had to share an assistant with some other Democrats, but it was like this great big deal. And he was like a political daddy to me, and I called him my political daddy. And just briefly, I'll tell you, when I decided to run for the state house, I went and see him. He'd become a circuit court judge. President Reagan nominated him for a federal judgeship. And so I sat on his porch in 2009, and most people said, Jeremy, there's no way you can win this. You have no chance at this. And I went to tell him what people were saying, and I kind of told him my story, what I was thinking I wanted to do. And he looked at me and said, Jeremy, I think you might just have what it takes to win. The next year we were allowed to win, and we've been here for 11 years. But I want y'all, if you don't mind, would you just rise with me? His sweet wife is Janet Porter. She's at home, and they're fixing to have his funeral. And guys, this was one of us who blazed the way for Republicans back in the day when Republicans had no chance. And we, no offense to the opposite side of the party, we're standing on the shoulders of men and women who were pioneers in this place. And I will say, and he told me this, he said, Jeremy, us rural legislators from East Tennessee voted the same as West Tennessee Democrats. And I heard all kind of wonderful, he had incredible relationships down here for years. And it's men and women like him that gave us, this second generation from them, the state that we have. A lot of times I find ourselves bragging on how amazing Tennessee is. And in the back of my mind, I think of people like Judge Porter, who worked across the aisle, who did everything what they could for their children and grandchildren. And we are reaping the benefits of their leadership. So, Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, we'll have a moment of silence. Amen.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, it was this day back in 1991 when I was serving abroad in Germany that I had my darling son, Bruce Camper, who is 30 years old today. So I want to wish him a happy birthday. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, Spencer Shaw, who is going off to become a Marine. The Army is still an option. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Manis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sunday, April the 11th is a very special day for this body, for the state of Tennessee, and for Williamson County. Just so happens that one among us will have a birthday on Sunday, April the 11th, and that is Chairman Whitson. It's been a pleasure for me to be his desk mate, so let's wish Chairman Whitson a happy birthday.
Any further announcements? Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of resolutions.
Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar, refer to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing in line with the desk be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bills 1,628 through 1,629 be introduced and passed on first consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bills 146, 163, 173, 177, 224, 279, 399, 410, 447, 488, 615, 699, 886, 1,132, 1,151, 1,179, 1,201, 1,229, 1,262, 1,270, 1,285, 1,307, 1,339, 1,612, and 1,615 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of their companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration, petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no objections filed.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none. We're voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 8 by Chairman Todd, a resolution to make application to Congress of the United States pursuant to Article 5 of the United States Constitution to call a joint convention proposing amendments to set limits on number of terms to which a person may be elected as a member of the United States House of Representatives and to set a limit on the number of terms to which a person may be elected as a member of the United States Senate.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of HJR 0008.
Chairman Todd moves adoption. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Todd, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, what this resolution does, it calls for Congress to set a time and a place for a convention, an Article 5 convention as laid out in our Constitution of the United States for one express purpose, and that is for setting term limits on the U.S. Congress. Our founders put this in the Constitution. It has never been used to this date because Congress has always appointed these amendments to the states to ratify. But as you well know, Congress is not going to limit themselves. They have proven this over and over. As a matter of fact, President Eisenhower even was quoted after Congress passed and states ratified the term limits on the office of president in 1954, that an amendment for congressional term limits could never achieve the blessing of Congress. It could be initiated only by the states. And that is, as you well know, the truth. So it is, I think, beholden on us to do that. And this mechanism was laid out by our founders and supported by our founders to give states that option to petition Congress to set a time and place. And then we send delegates that would then vote on whatever issue we ask them to, exactly how we ask them to. This body, the General Assembly, we control those delegates, and they must do what we tell them to. Otherwise, it's a felony. We can call them back and appoint new delegates. But the main thing about this is that some of the concerns that have been expressed is that this could go off the rails and rules could be changed, the Constitution could be changed without us ratifying it. It could be no further from the truth. The rules are laid out, how to ratify the Constitution. And we all have been bound to uphold the Constitution. This is one tool within it that states can control Congress in this situation. So I appreciate your support and I renew my motion.
Chairman Todd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. And thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I have the highest respect for you. But members, I rise in opposition of this. I have stood before previous sessions when this kind of legislation came before the body. I believe it's dangerous. We have not had a convention since 1787. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that some people that I respect, like the late former Justice Scalia, is quoted as saying, whoa, we don't want a convention. What can happen when we open that up? And that's my question I'm asking you. I mean, we don't have control over those delegates. We haven't, and I'll just have you check in what has happened lately here in Congress. We don't have the control over those delegates. And in this climate, in this political climate, we're going to risk opening up our Constitution for it to be a Trojan horse to go in there and totally give us something new. For 60 years, globalists have wanted to come for our Constitution. And may I just suggest this? Our Constitution is the only thing that protects us as citizens. Our Second Amendment, a holy grail for globalists to come and take that from us. And this in my humble opinion, is a way they can get to it. And don't think they're not trying to take our Second Amendment. That is the only thing that keeps us citizens instead of subjects. So I want you to really think hard about what we're doing here. You know, the buzzword is term limits. Last year it was balanced budget. The year before that it was limited government. And those are things that we as conservatives really embrace. But may I suggest to you that this is a Trojan horse to open a Pandora's box to literally change our Constitution. And then I might add in closing, term limits. Think about that. It's a nice, warm, fuzzy word. But have you really thought the process through what happens when you have term limits? Number one, first thing that comes to mind is you have a lazy voting populace. People know that, oh, they're going to be in there 2 years and they're going to be right out. So the elected member could go up there and do nothing but damage for 2 years and not be accountable for any of that. Plus, even the voting citizen will say, oh, she's only going to be up there 2 years, so what the heck? We'll put somebody else in there the next time. I want you to seriously think about what you're about to do. This is dangerous. They've been trying to do this for 60 years, and we don't have a problem with our Constitution. Not one problem. What we do have is people who don't listen to it or abide by it. Thank you, members. Please consider doing it. I stand in opposition of this, and I have a high regard for the sponsor. But thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members.
Chairman Todd, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've got a couple of things. There was a lot there that I have to work with, and I appreciate my colleague from Smith County and her passion for this. We've been carrying on about this for the last few weeks, and I appreciate her comments. I will point you to a 2014 law that this General Assembly passed that was the faithful delegate law. So it literally binds our delegates. She says we have no control over those, but and that has been purported by others, but we do in fact have full control over our delegates. Also, the quote from Justice Scalia is somewhat taken out of context. I would submit that the rest of that quote was, but if there were a targeted amendment that was adopted by the states, Article 5, I think the only provision I would amend is the amendment provision. So there's a more complete quote there that where he actually supported an Article 5 convention. We're not talking about a convention, a constitutional convention. There's only been one of those. When we formed the Constitution, that was a constitutional convention. And I have a number of quotes from James Madison that defends that, and I can certainly give you those. But Mr. Speaker, at this point, I'll renew my motion.
Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speakers and members and representative. Thank you for bringing this legislation. I have the utmost respect for you. I too, when I was initially approached to support the Convention of States, it sounded like a good idea for term limits. However, I submit to you, I join the comments of my colleague that this is a Trojan horse. This is a classic bait and switch. This is a well-financed campaign by those that want to get their hands on our Constitution, and they're dangling term limits out there for us to bite on. With all due respect, I disagree with my representative, the sponsor of the bill, that we can control the delegates. I spoke with our esteemed professor of law, Glenn Reynolds, about this precise issue and controlling the delegates. And his opinion was, as mine has been looking at other legal scholars, constitutional scholars, conservative constitutional scholars, says once the delegates are selected, they become federal officers. And state law cannot bind and control the federal officers. And this is exactly what happened in 1789 when we had the initial, the delegates were supposed to go and amend the Articles of Confederation. Well, what the delegates did is they said, you know what, let's just start all over. We're going to do a whole new Constitution. And it turned out great for us. But in this political climate, Are you going to put your faith in the people that are running the country in DC right now to come up with simply address term limits? I'm sorry, I don't have that faith and trust in our political body of America these days, and I would urge you all to vote against this dangerous proposal. Thank you.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will point you to that faithful delegate law where it specifically says if a commissioner votes outside of their instructions, their vote is void and null. If the commissioner votes outside their instructions, they forfeit their position. It's a Class E felony punishable by up to 6 years in jail for a commissioner to vote outside of the resolution calling for the convention or the further instructions from the General Assembly. As I said, this body controls the delegates by law. I'll also point you to quotes by James Madison in Federalist 40, where he states, referring to the delegates, and what has been stated here in many emails that you've received, that this could be that the original convention for forming a constitution was actually a runaway. Could be nothing further from the truth. According to James Madison, they were to frame a national government adequate to the exigencies of government and of the nation, and to reduce the Articles of Confederation into such form as to accomplish these purposes. They went with the express purpose of creating a constitution out of what we had. They did not run away. That was their charge by the states. The states had control of that completely. They directed that. Again, I'd be glad to take any other comments or questions, but I'll point you to something on a state level. It kind of took a little bit for me to get my hands around this and make sure I could associate this with something that we deal with here in this General Assembly. We have 95 counties in this state that are subdivisions of the state. We have given them the authority to exist. If all 95 counties got together next week in a convention or whatever they want to call it, and they decide they don't like the speed limit on Interstate 40 that you and I, many of us here travel every week, and they decide that 60 miles an hour is a better speed limit, and they decide among themselves by 2/3 majority or 3/4 majority, let's say 72 counties vote in the affirmative to change the Interstate 40 speed limit to 60 miles an hour, effective immediately. Do any of you think that next week that the state troopers will start writing tickets for anything over 60? They will not, because nothing changed. Even though those delegates from those counties thought they changed state law, our Constitution says only we change that law. That's no different than what our federal Constitution says about how to amend the Constitution. It takes 38 states to ratify anything that comes out of this meeting. An Article 5 convention, that any substance from that has to be ratified by 38 states. We will get a bite at that apple. We will get a chance, as we did in the early part of the last century, to ratify the amendment giving women the right to vote. That came to the states. Tennessee was the final nail in that coffin. We established that once and for all. So I would submit to you that we have the final say in this. This cannot be runaway. This cannot change our laws or our rules or our Constitution unless we, in fact, as a state, change that. So, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Shaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my colleague yield, please? Thank you. I rose to, I don't want to get in the weeds and talk about Republicans or about Democrats. I just want to talk about people in general. Personally, I think that if we pass this law and it becomes law, I think we take the voting rights of the people away. I've been here 20 years. I'm under term limits. And if the people didn't want me to come back, they would have voted me out. I don't think it's necessary for us to do this, because the people who are in Washington and the people who are in Nashville and wherever they are, however long they've been serving because it was the will of the people that elected them to come back, whether they were right or wrong. And sometimes who I think's wrong might be right for somebody else. So I think we take the will of the people away when we put term limits on people. Under those conditions, I can't vote for this because I wouldn't give the people in my district an opportunity to exercise their real right to vote. And secondly, in 2 years, it takes you that long to find out where the bathroom is. And if you're going to be effective and to help someone, you need to be in government long enough to understand how to help people. So with that in mind, whether you're Democrat or Republican, I think you ought to have a right to choose whoever you want to serve if that's your will. Thank you.
Representative Zachary. Oh, sorry, Chairman Todd, you have something you'd like to say?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that. And I appreciate my colleagues' comments. I certainly do. And I certainly take those to heart. I've wrestled with the same issue. You know, where am I on this based on the will of the voters? But I submit to you that we didn't have a restriction on the president's office until 1954. Our founders never dreamed that anyone would go to Congress or be president for a lifetime. But that's what we have now. That's the reality. When you're in that position, the finances you garner in your campaign account literally prevents others from ever having a chance at that seat as long as you can master that kind of money. That's what we see day to day. That is the real world that we have. Many of you know on a state level, some of my colleagues here have beat entrenched incumbents that were chairmen of big committees that had plenty of money and beat them with less than $20,000. So the state level is totally, it's a different game, as you all know. You see it every 2 years, we see that turnover. But on a congressional level, it's a different world. I've had it said to me that the safest job in America is a U.S. Senator. Once you get it, you keep it for as long as you want, because that power is so entrenched there. And again, I point you back to the article, to the amendment, rather, the 22nd Amendment that puts term limits on the U.S. presidency. There was a reason for doing that. We have a reason now with what we see day to day and year to year, decade after decade in Congress. So, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members actually rise in support of this legislation. So many times we stand in this body and we quote the Constitution, we reference the Constitution, and every word of the Constitution is important. So I don't understand why, if we call ourselves constitutionalists, this particular aspect of the Constitution doesn't apply, because the words are very clear, and the founders gave us a recourse as states on the federal government to check the power of the federal government. And if you read Article 5, it says, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments. A convention to propose amendments. And if you look at the words written in Federalist 485 by Alexander Hamilton, he said, by the 5th article of the plan, we may safely rely on the disposition of the state legislatures to erect barriers against the encroachment of the national authority. And it's also important to remember that during the Constitutional Convention of September 15th, 1787, Article 5 was debated vigorously, but passed unanimously by our founders who gave us the Constitution. So if you say you're a constitutionalist, but every aspect of the Constitution applies, but this particular section of Article 5, I'm not sure how how those two correlate. Chairman, thank you for bringing this. I fully support it because I support the Constitution. I support the words of the Constitution. And as Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 85, we as the state legislatures have been given the power to erect barriers against the encroachment of the federal government. And that's exactly what this does. So thank you for bringing it.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that comment. I really appreciate that. And it does point to a fact that I think a lot of us would appreciate. Our founders were states' rights activists. They wrote the Constitution to give states the power, not the federal government. Subsequent to passage of the Constitution, they fought tooth and nail to keep the power with the states. We have somehow over many decades let that end up in the hands of the federal government. This is one article within that Constitution that gives us the ability to take some of that back. I just submit to you that this is one of our responsibilities to adhere to, and I appreciate your support of this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Jernigan.
Thank you. And sponsor, I spoke about this in committee, and I'm opposed to really all Article 5. So because of the faithful delegate law we passed here, yes, there's punishments. Yes, you have to do what state law says, but there's nothing that prevents a delegate from going down to wherever this convention's held to go to federal court and say to a judge, I believe Tennessee's law is unconstitutional. And when they do say that, the judge says, you're right, it's unconstitutional. Now we're talking about Article 3 of the Constitutional that gives the federal government the power of the judiciary to say that a state's law is unconstitutional. And that could very well happen. I don't see, at that point, Tennessee can't punish the delegate because it's been ruled unconstitutional. So Article 3 is just as important as Article 5. And for that reason, I don't support any Article 5 legislation. So thank you, sponsor, and I appreciate, I have respect for you, but I can't vote for the bill.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate those comments. I think that issue by itself, to me, doesn't change a vote. We still have to ratify whatever comes out of that convention. I believe the states, I don't believe there's anything unconstitutional with us directing our delegates and holding them accountable. That would be debated in court. I can understand that. I believe we would win that argument. But either way, anything that comes out of that convention comes right here to this General Assembly to approve. If we don't ratify it, it doesn't become part of the Constitution. Nothing changes. But it is a shot across the bow at Congress that we're serious about this. That's another factor that we need to look at. What we do today tells Congress we want to hold you responsible. So I just admonish you to really consider that heavily. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, Representative Cassada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, I applaud your hard work on this bill. It's not the Constitutional Convention that concerns me. It's the meat of the matter, which is term limits. As we think of our activities here, it's our knowledge that we're represented by the people that keeps the bureaucracy from running state government. In my opinion, currently federal government is ran too much by the bureaucracy. And so if you take out the experience, all of a sudden bureaucrats, unelected individuals will be running federal government. That concerns me greatly. And so I'm voting no, because I like to depend upon my chairmen, upon you, and the knowledge that everyone in this room has, and the authority that's been given to you by the electorate to stop those that are unelectable, unaccountable. So thank you for your hard work. It's not that I oppose, again, the Constitutional Convention. It's the meat of the matter, which is term limits. I think the people should have that right of term limits, not us. Thank you.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would point out, and I appreciate my colleagues' comments on that, and that's debatable, whether you feel like an entrenched group of folks that have been there for many, many years, being reelected year after year because they have tremendous bank accounts, are actually accountable to the people and are actually watching the bureaucracy. I would submit they are part of the bureaucracy. They become part of the bureaucracy. That's the way the system has become, and we need to put a stop to that. I will mention polling across this great state of your constituents, and you've been getting the emails and phone calls just like I have, average 78%, and that's across all party lines. This is term limits on U.S. Congress is it polls very, very high in this state. Any way you want to ask the question, it polls very high. So our constituents are demanding this. This is the number one thing when I go home on the weekend that I get talked about. People stop me at church. I appreciate what you're doing on term limits. We've got to put some controls on Congress. Constantly get that. The only negatives I get are from the national organizations that are pushing against this because they are probably recipients of some of that power that's entrenched. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Kershaw, we're working. We got. I see everybody. I mean, we've got a list. Representative Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my good friend and colleague from West Tennessee. I very rarely speak up on bills where I'm not moving an amendment from judiciary or from criminal, and I also very rarely vote no on the House floor. So I just wanted, out of respect for you, just let you know kind of where my heart was. I also get talked to about term limits quite a bit when I go back home. But I engage in the conversation, and once we get into the layers a little bit, I actually find that people, they're not real clear on what term limits would really mean for them. And so what I want to remind folks is that our founders wanted the rights of minorities and of rural communities to be just as important as well-heeled folks from big cities like New York and San Francisco. We put in term limits. And the folks that are going to run the committees and going to have all the power are the people from the wealthy communities. That's just how it's going to go. And so if we want a country that's run by New York and San Francisco, then term limits are your plan. I mean, that is my fear, right? So I've talked to many other of our colleagues from other states where they have term limits. And I had one person tell me, they said, yeah, because of term limits, as soon as I got elected, I had 15 lobbyists in my office telling me how I was going to run my committee. And to be honest, I didn't know how to run my committee, so I needed as much advice as I could get. And then one of them said, yeah, and the day I was elected speaker, of course, I can only serve 2 terms, and it was just my turn to be speaker. I had to turn to the bureaucracy to tell me how to be a speaker, how to run my office. And so I realize this is a very popular notion. I know your heart is absolutely in the right place. And I too was tempted. I have talked about, the magic of term limits before I really thought about it. But if we want New York and San Francisco telling flyover country what to do, then let's have term limits. But if we want the rights of rural America, of rural Tennessee to be represented, then I think we ought to think long and hard before we do something like this. So that's why, out of all due respect, I just wanted you to know why I will be voting no this morning. It's not because I like the idea of folks being entrenched or being able to stick around for a long time, but if we want New York and San Francisco telling us what to do, then this is their dream bill. Thank you.
Chairman Todd, anything? Nope. Representative Sparks.
Thank you. With the sponsor yield. Sponsor, I just want to thank you for your courage and conviction on this. A lot of times when we're deliberating up here, I think of my late World War II father who flew 24 bombing raids on a B-17. And I think about the debt of this nation, where this country is going. Our founding fathers didn't intend for folks to go to Congress and the Senate, maybe worth $100,000, come out worth millions of dollars, serving 30 and 40 and 50 years. I encourage you to vote for this. And thank you, sponsor, for bringing this. Maybe this is a small tool in the toolbox to get this country back to basics. We're $28 trillion in debt, $1.8 trillion in student debt. What's being done about it? I don't see anything. We're leaving the next generation in debt, bankrupt. So thank you, sir.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call for the previous question.
Previous question has been called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 8 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 53, 34 nays, 4 present on voting.
House Joint Resolution 8, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 961 by Chairman Whitson relative to immunity.
Chairman Whitson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 961 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Whitson moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Whitson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill has nothing to do with term limits or the Constitutional Convention. The intent of this legislation is to provide law enforcement officers immunity from suit while making an arrest outside their jurisdiction. To qualify for immunity from suit, the officer must meet the following conditions. The law enforcement officer must be post-certified. The law enforcement officer must be authorized to make arrests as a full-time employee of a Tennessee county, municipality, or metropolitan form of government. For felony arrest outside an officer's jurisdiction, the officer must witness and reasonably believe that a person committed a felony or is committing a felony. For misdemeanors that amount to a breach of peace, the officer making an arrest outside their jurisdiction must witness that a person is in the process of committing such an act. Protection from suit is also offered to officers rendering assistance to law enforcement officers of this state in an emergency or at the request of the officer. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Whitson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 961, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
House Bill 961 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1613 by Chair Lady Littleton, relative to the charter of the town of White Bluff.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1613 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill amends the charter of the town of White Bluff. With that, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? All those in favor of House Bill 1613, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
House Bill 1613 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Let the journal reflect Representative Sparks is excused. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 200 by Chair Lady Littleton and others, relative to determination of parental rights. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 205.
Chair Lady Littleton moves substitute form Senate Bill 205 without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 205 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage of Senate Bill 205 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it the First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my honor today to carry House Bill 200 on behalf of Chairman Mike Carter. Let's continue to remember him in our prayers. As many of you know, for the past several years, Chairman Carter has worked diligently with the TBA adoption law section to revise and modernize our adoption statutes. His mission has been to make Tennessee #1 in adoption and lead the nation in matching children with loving families. House Bill 200 continues this mission by addressing termination of parental rights cases. Under current law, the courts consider whether the grounds exist to terminate rights, and if the grounds exist, whether terminating parental rights would be in the best interest of the child. There are currently 9 non-exclusive factors that courts shall consider in making a best interest determination. House Bill 200 would expand the factors to be considered, with an emphasis on the factors being more child-centered. This bill will clarify that a court is making a best interest determination would be required to consider every factor, nor would the court be limited to just the factors listed in the legislation. These revisions to statute will allow a judge the discretion to apply only the best interest factors that apply in a particular case. This discretion will assist judges as they make weighty decisions on whether to terminate parental rights. Barring any questions, I renew my motion and I ask you support in passing House Bill 200 to continue Chairman Charter's goal of making Tennessee a leader in adoption.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 205, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays.
Senate Bill 205, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Chairman Faison, for what purpose, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence and the body's indulgence, let's stand and, if it's all right, I'd like to offer a prayer for Judge Carter. Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning with bowed hearts, humbled, and corporately, we pray for our friend, our colleague, Judge Carter. I've always enjoyed hearing his take on stuff. He's got an incredible wit, and it matters that he's a part of this body. His efforts, his communications have been such an integral part over the last several years in the General Assembly, and it would be our will, sir, that he's healed and that you give doctors wisdom of what to do with him and how to bring him to full health. And if that is not your will and your will does not align with ours, we pray that you will bring comfort to his family, comfort to his wife, and that through this time, they will be made more known of your presence than ever before. And that he will experience the breath of life that you have given to each one of your children. And we love you, we trust you, and we know that you can do what no one else can do. In the powerful name of Jesus, amen.
Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 674 by Representative Freeman and others relative to food halls.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 674 on third and final consideration.
Representative Freeman moves passage properly second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. We're going to defer to the sponsor for further explanation. We move to adopt, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Kiesling moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So many of you have probably driven by and seen the new Assembly Food Hall on 5th and Broad. It's a 110,000 square foot facility spread over multiple levels with more than 20 food vendors. This bill creates a new liquor by the drink license called Food Hall specifically for this location. The reason for it is we needed a way to get multiple eateries under one main license, allowing the people there to move about the different venues with their drinks. And it also creates a process for the ABC to approve and regulate the individual eateries. This does not remove the responsibility of any of the tenants there for complying with any of the liquor laws, including preventing the patrons from leaving. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Freeman renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have one question. If there is a violation, would that violation shut down all the vendors at that time? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Freeman.
That's a great question, and I'm not sure I have an adequate answer. Because they're under one license, but they're separate, I would assume that it would just affect that one person.
All right. Any further discussion? See none. Any objection? Representative Doggett. Is that a question, Representative Doggett?
I do have.
Representative Doggett, you're recognized.
I think you ought to roll that a week.
Sponsor, in order to get to a question, that was a very valid question that was just asked. Would you be inclined to maybe roll this to Monday night so that we could get the answer to that before we move forward? Okay, thank you.
Representative Freeman.
Yeah, that would be fine. Thank you.
Roll the,
Next available calendar. Roll the next available calendar.
without objection, next available calendar. So ordered. Mr. Clerk, call up next bill, please.
House Bill 1196 by Representative Garrett and others relative to venue for certain actions against the state.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1196 on third and final consideration.
Representative Garrett moves passage properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up the First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt Amendment 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan moves adoption of Amendment number 1, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this legislation does is that if you are a plaintiff and you want to sue the state to challenge the state's constitution, currently that lawsuit has to be filed in Davidson County. What this does is it allows a plaintiff who wants to challenge the state constitution to file it in the county which the plaintiff lives. Another portion of this bill also describes or prescribes if a plaintiff is out of this state and decides to file a lawsuit against the state for challenging a state constitution, that lawsuit will be filed in Sumner County. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Garrett renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just curious, why would you move it out of the Capitol where, they're suing the state, the center of government for the state is Nashville. So what's the need for this? What's come about that we need this legislation?
Representative Garrett.
Am I on? Although the center of our government is in Nashville, our government is across this great state of Tennessee and does not exist just in Nashville. So that's why the venue now will be in Sumner County, which is not too far. And from the perspective of any cost to the state, there is none. There's no fiscal note on this. So Sumner County is more appropriate to hear any sort of out of state plaintiff for the venue to be in Sumner County.
Representative Mitchell.
Well, the last time I checked, all the laws seem to be made here. We meet here. I've never met in Memphis or Bristol. I don't know. This seems like maybe judge shopping. So with that being said, I'm going to have to kindly vote against your bill. Thank you.
Let the journal reflect Representative Eldridge and Freeman are excused. Representative Stewart, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will sponsor yield.
Representative Garrett.
Is this a response to any particular ruling by Davidson County Court? Is that why we're, after 100+ years, moving this to Sumner County out of the county that holds the capital?
Representative Garrett.
I think this is in response to, in my law practice, I had a call from a fella who had an issue against the state in West Tennessee. And when I researched his avenue to have relief, his only avenue was through Nashville. His avenue should be through his own county, through his own judge that he elected, so he can hear any grievances for relief that he decides to pursue. That should be in the county upon which he lives and upon which he was able to elect his own judge.
Representative Stewart.
Is there a particular case you're talking about? Because, for example, I know in tax cases, which are one of the set of cases that are tried in Davidson County mostly because the judges have deep expertise in the tax area, a person can choose. Person can choose to sue, as you say, in their local county. Person can choose to sue in Davidson County. Almost every large taxpayer chooses to sue in Davidson County because they know that the judges have seen these issues, have deep expertise, and they want that expertise. But since you can sue in either county, where does this solve the problem, this particular bill?
Representative Garrett.
Well, it seems that your question says that the judges here in Davidson County have some sort of more expertise than any judge in any county, and I would respectfully disagree with a lawyer who's elected by its electorate that has the capability of ruling on any issue that comes before them in their home county.
Representative Stewart.
That's not my question. Actually, what I'm saying is I'm trying to figure out for the first part of your bill what problem you're solving. Because in tax cases, which are, I think, the primary case where you have jurisdiction in Davidson County, the jurisdiction is already alternative. A taxpayer can elect Davidson County or can elect Cheatham County or whatever county the taxpayer is residing in. And my point about Davidson County judges is simply that because they have so many of these cases, they develop an expertise in these particular areas, which are quite complex. And that's why most large taxpayers, most corporations, partnerships choose, although they have the right to do otherwise, to pursue their tax cases in Davidson County because they want judges that have seen these issues before. It's not questioning the legitimacy of another judge. It's just when judges do one thing a lot, they learn about it. So my question is, since you can do it either direction as a taxpayer, why do we need this bill?
Representative Garrett.
Thank you for the question. For one, this bill has nothing to do with jurisdiction. Secondly, it is designed, if a corporation is duly incorporated and their registered agents exist in Davidson County, they can certainly utilize the courts here in Davidson County for any matters that relates to tax or otherwise. Taxes aren't limited to the expertise of Davidson County.
Representative Stewart.
Yeah, respectfully, that's not a question I'm asking. All I'm asking you is, in Davidson County, a taxpayer can already sue under the law in Davidson County, or they can choose their home county. So why do we need the first part of your bill if a taxpayer can already choose?
Representative Garrett.
I believe I've asked and answered that question.
Representative Stewart.
Well, respectfully, you have not. I'm hearing the record is reflecting that you haven't identified any problem that this bill solves or any rational basis for it. I wanted to give you that opportunity on the floor. Thank you.
Representative Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this issue and had this same bill 15 years ago. And let me talk about somebody besides the big entity, the multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar tax entity that we're talking about or business we're talking about. Let me tell you about the farmer back home who has an issue with TDEC and couldn't get his land use issue taken care of. He was going to have to drive down here, take 3 days away from his farm just to have this issue litigated because he couldn't get it done back home. Don't give me this home field advantage, this judge shopping issue. This is about that farmer who has an issue that he cannot get resolved. And we're 4 hours away from Nashville where I live. You might as well be on the other side of the world because that fella can't take that time away from his farm, 3 days away from his farm and his family to come down here and the cost that he's going to have in the hotel room and the gas. This is for the little guy that we've talked about. This is to give equal representation across the state of the Tennessee to those judges that were elected back in our districts who know the law just as well as any judge down here in Nashville. I take offense to what's been said already. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll strongly support this legislation.
Out of order. Representative Lafferty.
I was just curious, is there going to be, it's been brought up by two of my colleagues now about travel. This isn't going to impose any difficulties on our state government to travel anywhere outside of Nashville to address this. This can be handled, like my colleague just said, just as easily at home. Is that correct?
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The fiscal note is not significant for that purpose, and it contemplates our state attorneys, et cetera, that would have to defend or otherwise participate in this litigation across the state. They're already doing that.
Representative Love,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly appreciate the concerns that everyone has about travel and hotel room cost, and curious about the travel to Sumner County that others will have to make. Why Sumner County, out of all the other 94 counties, why Sumner County for this particular choice of venue?
Representative Garrett.
The question that's you've asked has already been asked, was asked through subcommittee, and the question should be why not? That an out-of-state plaintiff that has no residence here, where's that going to be? Someone 50 years ago decided it should be Davidson County. Don't know why that is, but now this bill puts those cases in Sumner County. Now, there's very few of those, but there are at times some groups that are not residents here, so they have to have standing in some form when they file the lawsuit, and venue has to be set by statute, and that's what this statute does.
Representative Love.
Yeah, thank you for answering. And unfortunately, I'm not on that subcommittee, so that's why I had to ask the question here, because I didn't get a chance to ask it. So your answer is Sumner County was chosen because of the outside, and I want to try to repeat what outside plaintiff not having venue is, and I don't want to restate it wrong, but.
Representative Garrett.
You're exactly right.
Representative Love.
Was there no other county
Representative
that
Garrett.
could have been
sorry.
used? I'm sorry. I used my
Representative
slow
Love, I thought
preacher.
that was the question. Go ahead.
My slow preacher speaking, I'm sorry. This is part of that delay we use sometimes to add effect. Was there no other county like that?
Representative Garrett.
There was no other county that I considered, but in theory, that could have been any of the 95 counties.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor.
Very good. Next up, Representative Marsh.
Call previous question.
Previous question has been called. Is there objection? 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. That 3, 4, 5. All right. We're on the board on previous question. The question is called. There's objection. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 62, 26 nays.
Previous question prevails. Oh, yeah, prevails. That's right. Previous question prevails. We're voting on House Bill 1196. All those in favor, as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 69, 21 nays.
House Bill 1196 having received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 842 by Representative Thompson and others relative to workforce development. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Thompson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 844.
Representative Thompson moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 844 without objection. So ordered. Representative Thompson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 844 on third and final consideration.
Representative Thompson moves passage of Senate Bill 844 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Thompson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill that's designed to expand recent efforts of apprenticeship opportunities for high school students. Does three things. One, it requires that each public high school designate a teacher, a principal, or some other employee serve as the apprenticeship training program contact for the school. 2, to require the Department of Education to compile and publish to its website a directory of name and contact information for the training program contact for each public school. And 3, to require the department to update this information by September the 1st of each year. With that, I renew my motion.
Representative Thompson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 844 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
Senate Bill 844 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1603 by Representative Griffey, relative to the mineral severance tax in Benton County.
Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of House Bill 1603 on third and final consideration.
Representative Griffey moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Local Government Committee moves to adopt.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, this is a private act brought to me by the Benton County Mayor and County Commission. What it would do, it would require operators liable for the collection and payment of county mineral severance tax to keep and preserve those records necessary to determine the amount of tax due and payable to the county for 3 years. It would also allow the increase in the severance tax from 10 cents to 15 cents per ton, subject to local approval. And Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Griffey renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1603 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts a vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Lafferty, aye. Doggett, aye. Wright, aye. Hazelwood, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 83, 4 nays, 1 present, not voting.
House Bill 1603 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1604 by Representative Griffey, relative to the pulpwood severance tax in Benton County.
Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of House Bill 1604 on third and final consideration.
Representative Griffey moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is subject to local approval. It's another bill, private act by the Benton County Mayor Lashley and the County Commission would require individuals that are collect pulpwood severance tax to keep those records for 1 year and report those results for an audit. And I renew my motion.
Representative Griffey renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1604 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts a vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Manis, aye. Hazelwood, aye. Travis, aye. Doggett, aye. Moody, aye. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
House Bill 1604 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 809 by Representative Powell and others, relative to confidentiality of data captured from license plate reader systems. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 699.
Representative Powell moves substitute and form Senate Bill 699 without objection. So ordered. Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you. I move passage of Senate Bill 699 on third and final consideration.
Representative Powell moves passage of Senate Bill 699 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments found.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill provides necessary protections for the implementation of license plate reader technology by stipulating that data from license plate readers remains private. This bill provides for the foundation for local law enforcement agencies to use license plate reader systems where it has already been authorized by a local government. Local governments may want to enact legislation that permits law enforcement agencies to use license plate reader technology, but want to ensure that enabling this technology is done in a way that protects Tennessee's privacy and only allows for the technology to be used for narrowly tailored governmental uses. The purpose for license plate readers include a couple of examples, such as helping law enforcement personnel solve crimes and protect public safety by assisting in locating fugitives and at-large violent criminals, and by helping locate endangered children and vulnerable missing elderly persons in response to Amber and Silver alerts. As a specific example in Tennessee, license plate reader or LPR technology helped police arrest a registered sex offender in Hendersonville after being alerted to a stolen vehicle. Police noticed the license plate matched with a stolen vehicle and subsequently discovered an active warrant for this individual. Another example is a success the city of Mount Juliet has had with license plate readers. Since instituting LPR technology in April of last year, license plate readers have helped Mount Juliet police solve over 100 crimes. This includes recovering 57 stolen vehicles, discovering 30 stolen license plates, and 2 stolen trailers. Additionally, the city of Mount Juliet found 11 wanted people and found a missing juvenile with implementation of LPR technology. This bill addresses privacy concerns by acting an exception to the Tennessee Public Records Act, protecting LPR data from public disclosure under the Act, while still allowing government entities to access this useful data for legitimate government purposes, while protecting the confidentiality of private personnel information. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I would renew my motion.
Representative Powell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 699, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As their member cast votes, their members change vote. Crawford, aye. Sapiki, aye. Ms. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 86, 1 nay, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 699, I received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 339 by Representative Jernigan and others relative to premises on which sales and consumption of alcoholic beverages is authorized.
You probably don't want to do that.
Representative Jernigan, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage, I move House Bill 339 on third and final consideration.
Representative Jernigan moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment clarifies licensing requirements for the Wild Horse Saloon under this legislation. I defer to the sponsor for further explanation. We move to adopt, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Kiesling moves adoption of Amendment Number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Jernigan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Ryman Hospitality owns the Wild Horse Saloon, General Jackson Showboat, and the Gaylord Springs, Links, in mine and Representative Beck's districts. These properties are under control management of Marriott International. This bill does 3 things. The Wild Horse Saloon will pay a higher limited service fee. Number 2, it designates the General Jackson Showboat as a paddle wheel steamboat company and will allow alcoholic beverages to be served in the dock area. And last, it will allow the ABC to grant a liquor license franchise to a management company, which in this case is Marriott International. I'm happy to go into further details, but I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Jernigan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 339 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 64, 17 nays, 4 present, not voting.
House Bill 339 have received constitutional majority. I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 117 by Chair Lady Moody, a resolution to confirm the appointment of Dr. Mark Gagne of Rutherford County to the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. Mr. Speaker, the SJR is on the desk.
Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur to Senate Joint Resolution 163. Did I skip a line? I skipped a line. Pardon me, members. I skipped a whole line. I move to substitute Senate Joint Resolution 163 for House Joint Resolution 117.
Chair Lady Moody moves to substitute Senate Joint Resolution 163 for House Joint Resolution 117. Properly seconded. Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 163.
Chair Lady Moody moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 163. Properly seconded. Ms. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Moody renews her motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 163, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Take the vote, Mr. Clerk.
Ayes 87, no nays.
Senate Joint Resolution 163 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 118 by Chair Lady Moody and others, a resolution to confirm the appointment of Marcy Rudd of Jackson to the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. Mr. Speaker, the Senate Joint Resolution is on the desk.
Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
I move to substitute Senate Joint Resolution 164 for House Joint Resolution 118.
Chair Lady Moody moves to substitute Senate Joint Resolution 164 for House Joint Resolution 118, properly seconded. Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 164.
Chair Lady Moody moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 164, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Moody renews her motion. Any discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 164, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Grills aye. Take the vote, Mr. Clerk.
Ayes 88, no nays.
Senate Joint Resolution 164, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 119 by Chair Lady Moody and others, a resolution to confirm the appointment of Billy Braun of Shelby County to the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. Mr. Speaker, the Senate Joint Resolution is on the desk.
Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
I move to substitute Senate Joint Resolution 165 for House Joint Resolution 119.
Chair Lady Moody moves to substitute Senate Joint Resolution 165 for House Joint Resolution 119, properly seconded. Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 165.
Chair Lady Moody moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 165, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Moody renews her motion. Any discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 165 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
Senate Joint Resolution 165 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 719 by Chairman Keisling and others relative to ambulance service. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Keisling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1597.
Chairman Keisling moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1597, properly second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Keisling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1597 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Keisling moves passage of Senate Bill 1597 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Keisling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 719 simply directs all county government governing bodies to ensure that at least one licensed ambulance service is available within their county. This was brought to me by our state EMS association. It also designates that the ambulance services to be designated as an essential service, just like our police and fire have. So I might add in closing that this has been supported by the Tennessee Mayor Association as well as Tennessee County Services Association. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion and we'll entertain any questions.
Chairman Keisling renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1597 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Powell, aye. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
Senate Bill 1597 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 874 by Chairman Terry relative to child placement.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 874 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Terry moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt Amendment 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan moves adoption of Amendment Number 1, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill requires a caseworker to document any objection to a child's placement with a relative made by another relative or interested party. In addition, the information will be added to the annual report on foster care. I renew my motion.
Chairman Terry renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 874 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 86, no nays.
House Bill 874 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr.
House
Clerk.
Bill 766 by Chairman Vaughn relative to insurance data security.
Chairman Vaughn, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 766 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Insurance Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kumar, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill move to adopt.
Chairman Kumar moves adoption of Amendment Number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm here today to present the Insurance Data Security Act. I could tell you more, but I can see you don't want more. So we'll leave it at that.
Chairman Vaughn renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 766 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays, one present, not voted.
House Bill 766, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 742 by Leader Lamberth relative to alcoholic beverages.
Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of House Bill 742 on third and final consideration.
Leader Lamberth moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to move this to the hill of the amendments, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, roll to the hill. Call up next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to the hill of the amendments. House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to move to withdraw Amendment 1. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Leader, I see that this bill has been amended several times. I've received a lot of concern about this legislation, probably in its original form, from a lot of nonprofits here in Nashville. I have the benefit of representing Nashville Ballet, Nashville Opera, and several others who rely on access to these wines from small vineyards and others for charity events. Can you address that? You've probably received a lot of the same concerns to the extent your amendment addressed the concerns of those entities.
Leader Lamberth.
Yes, sir. To my friend from Davidson County, thank you for asking that question. We've worked with all interested parties on this bill. The original premise of this is years ago, this body passed legislation to allow wineries to take advantage of online sales and wineries from out of state to be able to ship to consumers here, which is what many of those charities take advantage of. They're a part of wine clubs. They're a part of different, kind of conglomerates and larger wine companies that will either donate or sell to them items that they could not really get here many times. They also work with local wineries. So that bill passed and allowed for the online retail of wine. What none of us really envisioned is entities called fulfillment houses that are basically distributors. I mean, to use kind of a 30,000 foot view of it, that really take in from many different wineries and handle the distribution and delivery of those products. So the original version of this actually banned the usage of fulfillment centers. They are utilized by a lot of the wineries that will work with some of these nonprofits. And so we worked with a lot of folks to say, instead of banning fulfillment centers, let's bring them into the fold. Let's make sure the ABC can regulate them. Let's make sure that they are operating properly. If they're going to act like a distribution venue, then they're going to have to follow some of the same rules. And that keeps everything safe because, while we don't think about wine in the same category sometimes as hard liquor or beer, it is still an intoxicating beverage. And so we have to have a few more rules in place than it would be if someone were ordering, something on Amazon, a bar of soap or something like that. So we've resolved those issues so that wineries can continue to utilize those fulfillment centers. They just have to pay a fee and be regulated by the ABC like everyone else. And they can still do with the spirit of the original bill that allowed for online retail of wine. Those wineries can still do that and direct ship their products to consumers, which is really what we envisioned originally.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you for that explanation and for trying to address the concerns of a lot of those entities. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what was the problem of not regulating these fulfillment houses? What was that specific? The original version was trying to eliminate them, and now we're regulating them. So I'm trying to figure out what were they doing that was creating an issue, I guess.
Leader Lambert.
So when you're talking about a heavily regulated industry, there are certain taxes that are applied to those products, specifically because of the nature of those products. Those have to be paid properly. There are simply lots of regulations that deal with intoxicating beverages that have to be followed, both to make sure that it's not getting into the wrong hands, and alcohol, if you go back 100 years, can be made in a way that is dangerous. And so if you don't have some pretty strict guidelines and regulations on this type of particular product, you can get into a very dangerous area. And so what we were seeing with working with some of the shippers and some of the online entities, we were seeing a large amount of alcohol that was coming into this state completely and totally off the books. And so this just brings everything into the fold and makes sure that, again, it is the product that is being sold. It is well regulated. All taxes and fees and everything are being paid on this. You don't want to give an unfair advantage to someone who is not playing by the rules over someone who is abiding by the strict regulations that are associated with this product.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so, final question, an issue you just rose is if a nonprofit is accessing their wine from a fulfillment house for the purposes of a charitable event, is this going to ultimately increase the cost of that wine to that charitable organization that then would then be shared with the consumer or cut into their nonprofit fundraising?
Leader Lambert.
No, it should not do so.
Representative Clemens, you're good.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good. Representative Cassada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the leader. Initially, I didn't think it was too friendly to consumers, but you've worked with all the parties and made it so. So thank you, and I know you spent a lot of time on this. And so I want to ask you a question that I asked you earlier, just for clarification, and I'm coming at it more from the consumer perspective. If I, as a consumer, want to continue to go to my favorite winery, I can go there and buy my wine and bring it home. Is that correct?
Leader Lambert.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Representative Cassada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if I go out to Sonoma and I run across a wine that I like, I can buy it there and have it sent to me at my home address. That doesn't change. Is that correct?
Leader Lambert.
That's correct.
Representative Cassada.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I want to publicly say you've worked hard. There's been a lot of water run out of this bridge, and I personally want to say thank you very much for working with us, because we have in our district, both Chairman Wendell and I have a winery there that's been right in the middle of this. You've worked with them, and we thank you for that. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership in this area, and Chairman Holtzclaw as well for helping guide us through to make sure, again, we did no harm. We only improved the process that's being utilized out there now. Thank you, Chairman.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 742 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Jernigan, aye. Aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 78, 7 ayes, 2 present, not voted.
House Bill 742, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1064 by Chairman Curcio, relative to offender registry re-entry.
Chairman Curcio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1064 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Curcio moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Bond, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill, so we're going to defer to the sponsor for an explanation. But first, we'll move to adopt.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House Bill 1064 will provide landlords with protections against claims of negligence in renting, leasing, or otherwise extending housing opportunities to those that are formerly incarcerated. But I want to be clear that the protections in this bill will not apply in situations where the landlord knows this person was convicted of a violent or a sexual offense, or if they subsequently commit a violent or sexual offense. So what we're trying to get at here is we all talk about when folks go and pay their debt to society, and we say we want you to go back into the community and be a good, normal, upstanding citizen. What many of us who are not just as involved don't realize is that when that criminal record follows you, it's very, very hard to get housing. So many landlords are afraid to rent to folks who have, say, a nonviolent, non-sexual charge on their record because they're afraid they're going to be sued by the other folks that live in that building saying, well, you've endangered me somehow. But again, this is not designed to help anybody with a violent or a sexual charge. It just to give those landlords an extra level of comfort if they do want to extend that housing opportunity. But nothing in this bill would obligate them to do so. And this bill is supported by the Tennessee Apartment Association as well. And I renew my motion.
Chairman Kershaw renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Man, I was about to stand up and give you one of them slow claps. You know, that's why you're an integral part of the Seersucker Caucus, man, because this is good legislation. Good legislation. And it speaks to our true effort in giving people an opportunity to get back to life. You know, I really appreciate that, man. Appreciate you bringing this bill. I had no idea, but I'm really thankful for it. And I'm signing on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Stewart, you're recognized. He passes.
Pass.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will sponsor yield?
Chairman Kershaw, Representative Griffey.
Members, this proposal gives me some heartache based on my experience. The prosecuting crimes, defending defendants charged with drug offenses, firearm offenses. So what this bill would do, as far as I can read it, that if a drug dealer rents an apartment, and even if the landlord knows that he's a convicted drug dealer, maybe a drug dealer that had a weapon with him in a previous conviction, and he rents an apartment next door to a family with a couple little kids. And then later on, a drug deal goes bad in the next door apartment, guns get pulled, somebody gets shot, a bullet goes through the wall and kills a little baby or somebody like that. Evidence of the person's drug conviction with a firearm would not be allowed to be introduced into the trial for negligent renting concerning the death of that child or injury to somebody else. So for that reason, I can't support this legislation. Thank you.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate those concerns. And we talked earlier, again, in the example you used with the gun involved, that would make that a violent crime. This does not include violent crimes. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Chairman Kershaw, thank you for bringing this legislation. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to clarify one thing. This doesn't in any sense obligate the landlord in any sense to rent. I mean, they still can make that choice on their own. Is that something am I understanding that correctly, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
Chairman Kershaw.
Yes, sir, that's correct. This would just, anybody who's inclined to extend a housing opportunity, this just gives them a comfort level basically to go ahead and do that. But it would not obligate anybody to do it. So folks who aren't doing this now, don't want to do this now, would never have to do this. But for those folks who have responded to us through our roundtables and so forth that we've talked about through the criminal justice reform process, have said, look, I would actually extend these opportunities. I'm just afraid that I'm going to open myself up to all these ticky-tack kind of simple negligence lawsuits just saying, oh, well, I don't want to live in the same proximity as this other person. So that's what we're trying to do here.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman Kershaw, for that explanation. It's the exact reason why I'm supporting this legislation. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1064 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 71, 10 nays, 3 present, unvoted.
House Bill 1064, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 568 by Chairman Reagan and others relative to administrative procedures.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 568 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reagan moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. It defines a proposed rule more strictly and allows a person to file suit directly with the Chancery Court where they reside, rather than Davidson County when a rule is not adopted in compliance with the UAPA. I defer to the sponsor for further explanation. Move to adopt.
Vice Chairman Reedy moves adoption of Amendment Number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to require rulemaking agencies to use rulemaking procedures that involve public hearings to the maximum extent possible. Currently, there are 3 ways for executive agencies to promulgate rules. One is emergency rules. This does not touch that way. The other 2 are proposed rules, and the standard which we prefer this bill is encouraging with public hearings. An agency must promulgate rules to avoid losing funding from the General Assembly. That can be done by emergency rules when they're concerned about time. They must promulgate rules also with mandates from this body under the emergency rules. However, except for correcting grammar, spelling, or non-substantive issues with rules, the proposed rulemaking system is not one that should be used. Rather, it should be one that involves the public, because rules once promulgated have the force of law. With that explanation, I stand ready to answer questions and renew my motion.
Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 568 as amended, vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Lynn, aye. Hodges, aye. Lamberth, aye. Gillespie, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 85, 3 nays.
House Bill 568, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 570 by Chairman Reagan relative to the stay of the effective date of a rule.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 570 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reagan moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. It establishes a time limit on staying a rule not to extend past the 5th legislative day of the subsequent year from when the rule was filed, rather than the current 75-day maximum. I defer to the sponsor for further explanation. Move to adopt.
Vice Chairman Reedy moves adoption of Amendment Number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I bring to you a vitally important issue with this bill. As I mentioned in the previous bill, rules, once promulgated, have the force of law. If you will permit me, I will quote from the Tennessee Constitution, Article 2, Section 1. Into 3 distinct the powers of the government shall be divided into 3 distinct departments: the legislative, executive, and judicial. Article 2, Section 2. No person or persons belonging to one of these departments shall exercise any of the powers properly belonging to either of the others, except in cases directed or permitted herein. Ladies and gentlemen, we in the General Assembly authorize executive agencies to promulgate rules. As I mentioned before, once those rules are properly promulgated, they have the force of law. However, because our Constitution has vested in us and us alone the power to create law, those rules must be brought before the Government Operations Committee for approval before they can stand. However, the system is set up, as you heard with the amendment, the Government Operations Committee can put a 75-day stay on it. At that point, if things have not been fixed, that rule goes into effect. In other words, it becomes law or the equivalent of law without this body having approved it. Fortunately, most of the agencies, when they are confronted with a 75-day stay, take the hint and they withdraw it and take it back and rework it. Unfortunately, there have been some who have not. This bill is an attempt to ensure that we protect our constitutional prerogative by simply taking that 75 days and saying that stay is in effect until the next time this body meets and has the opportunity to approve or disapprove as an entire body whether or not that should be that rule should have the force of law. With that explanation, ladies and gentlemen, I ask for your support on this bill. I renew my motion.
Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 570 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As they remember vote, as they remember wish to change their vote. Lynn, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, 5 nays.
House Bill 570 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 620 by Representative Rutter and others relative to telehealth. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Rutter, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 429.
Representative Rutter moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 429, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Rutter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 429 on third and final consideration.
Representative Rutter moves passage of Senate Bill 429 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Insurance Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kumar, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is included in the Senate bill. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Rutter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 620 amends current statute on the provider-based telemedicine and allows for audio-only technology for behavioral health services if other means are not available. I renew my motion.
Representative Rutter renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 429, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As they remember, cast your vote. As they remember, wish to change their vote. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 86, no nays.
Senate Bill 429, I received a constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 659 by Representative Campbell relative to the Office of Local Government and the Office of the Comptroller of the Treasury. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Campbell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 541.
Representative Campbell moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 541 without objection. So ordered. Representative Campbell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on Senate Bill 541 on third and final consideration.
Representative Campbell moves passage of Senate Bill 541 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Ms. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Campbell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill came to me from the Office of the Comptroller of the Treasury and makes government work better by removing what are obsolete references to the Office of Local Government, and those duties have been absorbed by the Division of Property Assessments within the Comptroller's Office. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Campbell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 541, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As they remember, cast your vote. Does any member wish to change their vote? Weaver, aye. Dixie, aye. Sexton, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 85, no nays.
Senate Bill 541, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1155 by Representative Gillespie, relative to catalytic converters. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1612.
Representative Gillespie moves to substitute and form Senate Bill 1612, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to passage of Senate Bill 1612 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves to pass Senate Bill 1612 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment Number 1. It's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Howe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt. Move to
withdraw.
Move to withdraw. Thank you.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is it's a collaborative effort between metal recycling industry, law enforcement to help combat the problem of catalytic converter theft. This legislation requires that any person engaged in the business of buying or selling unattached catalytic converters to notify their local sheriff or chief of police. These people must also be registered as a scrap metal dealer with the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. They must have a fixed location of business, and they must document and collect the IDs of the person selling a detached catalytic converter. Any person possessing an unattached catalytic converter without proper documentation is presumed to be in the possession of contraband. Each undocumented catalytic converter possessed is punishable by a Class A misdemeanor with a fine only. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1612, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Kumar, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
Senate Bill 1612, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 705 by Representative Russell.
Representative Russell, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make the motion to send this back to calendar.
Without objection, sent to calendar and rules. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 350 by Leader Lamberth and others, a resolution to congratulate Candace Owens on relocating to Tennessee.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move adoption of HJR 350.
Leader Lamberth moves adoption of HAR 350. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, Amendment 1 by Leader Lamberth. Mr. Speaker, it was not timely filed. The sponsor is allowed a 1-minute explanation.
Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment fixes some clerical issues that were in the original resolution. That is literally all it does. There was a name of a city that needed to be changed over.
You've heard the motion. Is there? Nope. You've heard the motion. We're voting for consideration of amendment number 1. All those in favor of considering amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 70, 18 nays.
In accordance with Rule 60B, having received the necessary 2/3 vote, the motion to consider amendment number 1 prevails. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move adoption of amendment 1.
Leader Lamberth moves adoption of amendment number 1. Any discussion? Any objection to voice vote? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 350 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, the same member wishes to change their vote. Ramsey, aye. Campbell, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
68, 21 nays.
House Joint Resolution 350, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a message calendar.
Call the first message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1112 by Chairman Vaughn and others relative to local government. Mr. Speaker, on April 1st, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 1112 for Senate Bill 1150, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 1112 as amended.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur with the Senate's amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion? Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the sponsor yield?
Chairman Vaughn does. Representative Powell.
Thank you. I've got some concerns with this. I know the Senate amendment had some pretty substantial changes to this bill. And, local governments have been promoting contracting with, say, small veteran-owned and minority-owned businesses for more than a decade now. And with no harm, and it's helped grow small businesses. And I feel like by barring any consideration of the workforce qualifications, some or all of these policies could be made invalid. If no verification of a contractor or workforce is allowed, how can a small business certification be determined under this bill as amended?
Chairman Vaughn.
To my well-respected friend from Davidson County, this bill doesn't contemplate that as much as it does what happens on the job site. That's what we're really concerned with this. Shouldn't be a problem for those businesses to be certified through record keeping, through the office, through submission of information. What this bill does is tends to keep the job site, limited access to the job site for those employees and subcontractors of the contracting facility or contracting agency. When local governments issue building permits, when they issue entitlements and approvals for projects, at that point, once those documents have been issued, this bill contemplates the position that that's time to let the professionals go to work and keep the job site safe and adhere to a standard of rules that apply all across the state, which include both state and federal. And so what we're trying to do with this bill is to make sure that a contractor adheres to the same set of rules wherever he operates in the state of Tennessee.
Representative Powell.
Okay, so then your assertion, you're saying that there's no, this doesn't affect the Tennessee Public Contracting Act when it pertains to purchasing and bidding contracts that might exist at the local level that they might have concerns with?
Chairman Vaughn.
No, sir.
Representative Powell. Okay, and then if a local government, because we had an issue here in Nashville, a very tragic issue where a worker was under unsafe conditions and actually fell to their death. They were at it was in my opinion, a clear violation of different, OSHA rules and standards that existed. And so I think that it's been contemplated of locals trying to look at that and make sure we have really set worker safety standards. So would this way impact the local government's ability to, if there are unique circumstances that exist in that municipality, to address those worker safety standards?
Chairman Vaughn.
Representative, the intent of this bill is to make sure that the job site adheres to state and federal OSHA requirements. if a municipality invokes more, if they have their own safety inspectors, that does not adhere to this act. This is about TOSHA and OSHA standards being applied. Now then, one thing that it does preclude, it will preclude local municipalities saying that a subcontractor or a hourly temporary worker who's on a job site for 30 days or more has to become an employee of the contractor. That's one of the things that we're seeing. And so it would preclude a local municipality from saying if a temporary employee is on a job site for 1 month or more, they have to be an employee with benefits of the contractor. This does contemplate that, and this disallows that.
Representative Powell.
Okay, well, I guess I appreciate your explanation. I still have some concerns with the bill as drafted because I think that there are some issues that maybe affect the Contracting Act as it's written. And I know, unfortunately, with that situation I referenced, there's been a lot of kind of passing the blame back and forth between contractors and subcontractors as far as who that employee actually was working for. And I think that part of that, what the city is trying to do is contemplate that and make sure that we're protecting all workers. But I appreciate the explanation of the sponsor. Thank you.
Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Not 1 inch. No.
Thank you, sir. Can you explain to us exactly what the Senate did to your bill in their amendment, please?
Chairman Vaughn.
Yet, if you will give me one moment, I had it left my iPad on the desk, and I can give that to you. Just one moment. What the Senate did was they added additional language that you can't provide access to a work site for anyone who would not otherwise have a legal right to access the work site under federal or state law. You cannot provide access to personnel information or data of anyone furnishing labor or materials on a work site to a third party, including a non-employee designee, unless that is required by federal or state law, or that third party is a CPA retained by the government contracting entity to conduct an overall audit of the site. Require written contracts or agreements for the provision of labor or materials furnished in furtherance of the improvements, unless otherwise required by state law. So I guess that says that not every agreement has to be written. You don't have to have people on your job site. And then you can't be on a job site to offer direct employment to a temporary laborer or an employee regardless of the temporary laborer's or temporary employee's length of service. That's what
Representative Beck.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Chairman Vaughn.
Of course.
Thank you very much. I have a concern because it looks like from the Senate amendment, as you explained, that it prevents a municipality from imposing new requirements with respect to safety. In Davidson County, we have a large amount of blasting, and I know there's been talk about providing additional requirements to make sure that people engaged in blasting, use of explosives in residential areas have that safety knowledge. Looks to me like your bill would prevent us in Davidson County from addressing this local problem. Am I right about that?
Chairman Vaughn.
The local problem can be addressed in a number of ways, Representative, whether it comes through the issuance of the permits, whether it's through the entitlement process that the local jurisdiction wants to engage in prior to issuing any blasting permits. But once a contractor gets on a job site, they will adhere to either federal OSHA standards or Tennessee OSHA standards. That's where the line is drawn with regards to this bill.
Representative Stewart.
Yeah, and I guess I guess my concern is, here in Davidson County, we have maybe some unique circumstances that our local government would want to deal with. We have a large amount of development. We have a limestone base that most counties don't have outside of Middle Tennessee. It's got its unique properties, and it basically means anytime you want something that's deeper than 3 feet, you have to use dynamite to make it happen. Also, we've got people packed in real close. In the South Nashville part of my district, we have it's a very heavily populated area, but there's a lot of development and there's a lot of blasting. And obviously, that's a very significant matter to homeowners who are suffering damage and really calling their council people wanting relief. I'll just tell you, I haven't noticed that the absence of this law has slowed down development in my district. And I'm a little bit concerned about imposing a new regulatory structure from the state level on localities that seem to be doing a pretty good job of balancing this bill. So I'm going to vote against your bill.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, I just rise to support the bill. I think we kind of got a little bit off on a side note. The fact of the matter is we have state laws like this as it relates to safety, because whether I'm building a facility in Murfreesboro and blasting rock in the Speaker's district, which sandstone up there is harder than a lot of limestone in the state, that we have a predictable end as it relates to safety across the state. So that when I go to any one of your districts, and I know when I go on there who's going to be on this job site, who has access to the job site, and what the rules for safety are going to be, so that we can protect not just the people that surround the property, but also protect the people that are working there. And so I really appreciate this bill. I think it sets a standard. I think the reason why we have a statewide standard and a federal standard as it relates to OSHA is because they have thought of all the different ways in which safety is impacted on a construction site, whether it's a road building project or a 30-story high-rise. So thank you for this bill. I look forward to supporting it.
Chairman Keesling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 64, 21 nays.
Senate Amendment number 1, receiving the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the message calendar, Mr. Speaker.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In consultation with the minority leader, I move that House Bill 73 be heard in the Finance Subcommittee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bills 1,131, 865, 580, 1,210, 1,266, 1,020, 1,501, 1,174, 1,294, 1,591, 752, 753, and 917 be heard in the Education Administration Committee next week.
For the motion, any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for immediate consideration of SJR number 497.
Mr. Clerk, please read the caption.
Senate Joint Resolution 497 by Leader Lamberth, a resolution to call a joint convention of the Senate and the House of Representatives.
You've heard the caption. Any objections? Without objection, the rules are suspended. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this resolution would say that on Monday, April the 12th at 4 p.m., we would gather together in this chamber with our Senate counterparts to honor Lamar Alexander, whom we would have honored in his retirement last year. We will have Senator Alexander here and be able to honor him for his public service that has spanned literally longer than my lifetime. We will also be gathering in joint convention for the confirmation of Judge Jill Ayers to the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals. That is the two items that are on this resolution. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I move to concur in SJR number 497.
Leader Lamberth moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 497. Properly second. Any objection to the question? Any objection to a voice vote? See none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I declare it adopted, concurred in. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Representative Griffey, under unfinished business or
Mr. Speaker, I don't know if this is out of order. Yesterday afternoon at 4 p.m., we lost a dear teacher in Henry County Public Schools, Kim McDaniel. And I just wonder if we might take a moment of silence to recognize her and get our prayers for her family. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, I have a message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House, House Bill 1611, substituted for the Senate bill on the same subject, amended and passed by the Senate.
Monday's message calendar. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House, House Bill 72, substituted for the Senate bill on the same subject, amended and passed by the Senate.
Monday's message calendar. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House, House Bill 267, substituted for the Senate bill on the same subject, amended and passed by the Senate.
Monday's message calendar. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, thanks to the hard work of the Transportation Committee members, the Transportation Committee is closed.
Representative Beck, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To all members, you should have received an invitation from our Secretary of State for the dedication of the new library and archives right down the street in Bicentennial Mall, Monday at 1, and I hope you all can make it. Thank you so much.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next week, the House Health Committee will meet immediately following Property and Planning Subcommittee on Tuesday, April 13th at approximately 5 p.m. We will begin hearing our last calendar. We will begin taking up vaccine-related bills first, and we will still plan to meet at our regularly scheduled time on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to take a brief moment to give a shout out to my intern / constituent that's in the gallery, Mr. DeAndre Dockery. Let's give him a hand.
Chairman Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, per the calendar that was sent out last night, the House Criminal Justice Subcommittee has changed times from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Wednesday next week. We're going to 5 o'clock. That also goes for those that are going to be having guests to come in and testify. Make sure that you have the proper 24-hour notice to get those things lined up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Halford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to announce that the House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee is closed, and not to be outdone by my friend over here across the aisle. He was first, but we got our business done quicker than he did. So I think that is a draw for us.
Thank you. Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Remember, on Wednesday, April 14th, the Finance Subcommittee will consider the constitutional amendment calendar, which will include only those constitutional amendments previously passed by the 111th General Assembly. Then there will also be a separate calendar for constitutional amendments being considered for the first time in this General Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for those of you who have been waiting all this session to watch the scintillating Commerce Full Committee in action, you've got one more chance. Tuesday, 10:30 is our final calendar. So we look forward to dispensing with it. Plenty of seats are still available. Thank you.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At Finance Full meeting on Tuesday, we'll be hearing from Commissioner Ely with the budget, the supplemental budget proposals from the governor. So those of you who might have an interest, you can join us or watch it later online. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Holtzclaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it is my pleasure to announce that Department and Agency Subcommittee is now closed, subject to call of the chair.
Very well. Any further announcements? Once, twice, three. Very good. Next order, Mr. Clark.
Roll call.
Roll call. Ms. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 89 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to SJR, I move that the House stand in recess until 5 p.m. on Monday, April 12th, 2021.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 5 p.m. on Monday, April 12th, 2021.